Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name is Christoph and today we're going to continue watching The Lord of the Rings with the second part, The Two Towers. I've worked a bit to get the video and audio quality a bit higher. I changed the lighting and the setting from where the camera is positioned, and also I have the mic a bit closer to where I am. Yeah, also I tend to be quite nervous at times. I like to speak in front of people, but I have difficulty speaking in front of a camera. So hopefully this will get a bit easier in the future. We'll see. There are two things I wanted to mention from the last movie that I forgot. One of them is the sound design. I haven't said as much about sound as I usually come up with. One of the things that I would have wanted to mention in the last movie was the design of the troll. So in Moria, the troll is voiced by two different animals for the breathing, one for inhaling and one for exhaling, so that they could tune it in the way that it sounds best. And towards the end it gets more and more squealish, so I think they changed it towards a pig and other animals like that, so it doesn't sound as aggressive as much, and you feel a bit of pity for the troll when he dies. Yeah, I think the description in the documentary was that they wanted to make him sound like a big baby who's just destroying everything and doesn't quite understand what it's doing. The second one is something that has been appearing in comments all over Lord of the Rings reactions. So a lot of people love to say that the four hobbits are a hint towards the four friends that were fighting together in the First World War, or that certain aspects of the movie or the book are a metaphor or an allegory towards things that happened in real life, either First World War or Second World War. Tolkien had a very strong opinion about these things because he didn't agree with any of them. If you want to read more about it, read the foreword of the second edition of The Lord of the Rings, where he goes into detail about what he thinks is correct and what not. Yeah, so I guess now we can start the movie. I remember how this was such an awesome scene in the cinema, because you didn't really know what to expect, you didn't know where the movie picked up again, and yeah, you just saw the mountains, you couldn't quite understand what was going on until you heard Gandalf's voice, and the whole scene where he fights against the Balrog is just really greatly done. And it also gives a hint of what happened in the last movie, which is relevant again, so it's really a great way to abridge these two movies. You see Gandalf grabbing onto a horn here. So yeah, the interactivity with something that is obviously so digital and so much CGI is just really well made. The whole thing feels quite real, even though pretty much nothing of that is actually film footage.
Just a bit of seasoning. I thought maybe if we was having a roast chicken one night or something. Roast chicken?
So here Sam is carrying salt with him, which is obviously something precious when you're in the wilderness. But in the book he was given by the Lady Galadriel a small box with soil from Lorien. Incredibly fertile soil that he's then later using to rebuild the Shire. And he is, I think in the box is also a seed of a malon tree, which was then later planted in the Shire. So these visions that Frodo has of looking into the eye, in the book it's usually explained the other way around, that the eye is searching for him, and he can feel when the gaze passes by. It's not like Frodo has actually incredibly far-sighted capabilities.
They're thieves. They're thieves. They're filthy little thieves.
Most of you will know that Gollum was completely CGI character, which at the time was quite a marvel. I think the only one comparable from the same time period would be Jar Jar Binks from Star Wars Episode 1. And I recently read that the amount of detail, the amount of polygons that was used to create the model is similar to what is nowadays used to create a single eye of one CGI character. So for that, it's quite impressive of what they made. I don't think when I watched the first time I noticed how much hair Gollum has. It's something that is only really obvious with the newer Blu-ray versions that you can really see. So they had to shoot the scene 3 times. Once they shot it with Andy Serkis, the actor of Gollum, so that they would be able to understand what the reactions were, and then they shot it again without him, so that they would have the footage where he could be integrated into later. I think it was in the 3rd movie that they started using the footage with Andy Serkis to then create the shot, because it's more interactive. But here it's really just the shot without him, that where they added Gollum into. And then the 3rd shooting would be of Andy Serkis in the blue suit with all the motion capture points on his body. And that would be where the movements for Gollum would come from. The fact that Gollum feels pain from the rope of Sam is also something that's mentioned in the book, because the elvish things tend to hurt evil people or evil creatures. This scene is quite a key scene in the book, because what happens here is you have 3 different groups of orcs meeting. And you have the Uruk-hai that want to bring the hobbits to Saruman. Then you have here the orcs from Mordor, who want to get the ring and bring it to Sauron. They were the ones that were attacking the Fellowship on the Eastern Shore, as I mentioned in the last movie, something which only happened in the books. And then you have a 3rd group that came down from Moria and wanted to avenge their fallen captains. And that would be the pale one that is here shown next to the main one. The main orc is called Grishnach. And I think the captain of the Uruk-hai was... what was the name? Something with you. Ugluk. Gimli does not suffer as much in the books. This is something that was exaggerated for comic relief in the movies. But they are all running a lot and a very long distance in short time. Something that is praised later by Eomer when he learns. I think it's in 3 days, something like... Was it 48 miles or something? Or probably 48 leagues, and then you have to multiply that by 3, because 1 league is 3 miles. Legolas is actually the one who could go on faster than the other 2. So it's Aragorn and Gimli who are basically holding Legolas back, because they need to sleep, while elves do not really sleep in that same sense.
Come, Gimli! We're gaining on them!
I'm wasted on cross.
In the book, they are actually getting further and further behind, because they notice how quick the Uruk-hai are going. As it's mentioned in a few seconds, that the power of Saruman is driving them on and tiring Aragorn and the others.
The Uruks turn northeast! They're taking the hobbits to Isengard!
They should actually turn northwest and not northeast. I don't know why they mixed the directions here.
Who now has the strength to stand against the armies of Isengard?
Here they show Saruman in the way that he appears towards the end of his story, and that is more as a servant to Mordor and not as a rival. Just because Sauron's dominion over Saruman becomes stronger and stronger the more Saruman uses the ring. So in the book, there is quite obviously a war going on between Saruman and Rohan. At least it's a bit more obvious than what you see here. The king is constantly saying that he doesn't want to go into open war, and he forbids Eomer and anyone else to hunt orcs during that time. And that is obviously the direct influence of Saruman, making the king allow free passage for the Uruk-hai that are going through Rohan. I never liked scenes like that.
We will die for Saruman.
So he's the chieftain of the Dunlendings, which is a small country, Dunland, that is east of Isengard, and they used to live in the areas that Rohan has populated now. And so he is furthering this idea of the Dunlendings having been driven into the hills by the evil rohirrim.
Those who oppose us, it will...
In the book they're also part of the Battle of Helm's Deep.
is ready to fall.
So here we see the outcome of the second Battle of the Fords of Isen. So Isen is the river that signifies the border of Rohan, and you have Isengard attacking that place and Rohan defending it with armies. As I said, the war is a bit more clear in the books than it is in the movies. And In the second battle, there was a group of Uruk-hai that went straight towards the son of the king, Theoden, and that is who they're searching for now.
He's alive.
He's not alive in the books. Rohan is actually Grey Elvish, and it's the word that the Gondorians who speak Grey Elvish gave to the country after the rohirrim came there. They were called the Aeltheard, which is an Old English term for basically the same thing, the horse people. They were given the plains of formerly called Calednarodon, the Green Plains, which were part of Gondor before Rohan started, or the rohirrim started helping Gondor in battles against the orcs. So Eomer and Eowyn are brother and sister, and they are children of Eomund, brother of Theoden.
Saruman the White has ever been our friend.
Grima actually does not have eyebrows, they always shave them off.
Orcs bearing the white hand of Saruman.
In the books, Eomer is put into prison and not exiled, and that was only done after he killed orcs at the eaves of Fangorn. So, as I said before, the order of the king is to not attack anyone.
Trees that could whisper, talk to each other, even move.
Yeah, so the Old Forest is something that actually appears in the book, because the hobbits have to go through it on the way to Bree. And it used to be connected to Fangorn by the forest that went through Rohan, through the Gap of Rohan, and then towards the east. A lot of the forests in Middle-earth in the Third Age have been deforested? Have been victims of deforestation because the Númenóreans in the Second Age were building such a huge fleet that they were cutting down a lot of trees. Basically, most of the forests that are anywhere near the shores. This is similar to what happened in Greece and Spain during the times when fleets were made. In the book, Grishnar actually says that he knows that it's the ring that they're supposed to have. And he wants to give them freedom if they give him the ring. And yeah, of course they can't really do that, but they play along for a few minutes until Rohan arrives. Rohan has actually quite a lot of horse archers. So that is something that is kind of maybe more elvish theme. It's also mentioned in the Silmarillion that a lot of elves are horse archers, but yeah, the Rohirrim being horse masters, they also learned that.
The red sun rises. Blood has been spilled this night.
In the books, Legolas has a lot more wisecracks like that he keeps giving out. In the book, the Rohirrim can't see them because they also use their cloaks to hide themselves.
Give me your name, Horsemaster, and I shall give you mine.
In the book, they're not as aggressive against each other. Actually, one of the themes of the book is that when good guys meet, they immediately understand that the other one is good, and they help each other quite a lot.
If it stood but a little higher from the ground.
And of course, in the book, Eomer is going back towards Edoras after this confrontation. Something you can see from the cultural aspects and the design of the movie is that the helmet actually has a horse in the crest, complete with mane and nose and everything. So this is one of the details that are a bit difficult to appreciate when you might not know about them. But yeah, once you see that, it's really a lot of detail that went into this. And then it has the horse hair on top as well.
We piled the carcasses and burned them.
So the language of the people of Rohan is Old English, at least in this framework that Tolkien translated the languages of Middle-earth into something that would be English for the common speech and Old English for the Rohirrim speech. And this is so that the hobbits, who would be the native English speakers, would feel that the words are similar to the things they know. So, for example, hobbit is something that went on from the original word holbytla, which is hole builder, and that is the way that the hobbits are building their houses in the ground. And so it actually is hinted here that the Rohirrim were living in the same area as the hobbits many, many years before the hobbits went to the Shire and before the Rohirrim came to Rohan. And that is the area where Smeagol and Deagol lived and were fishing. Samwise and Gimli camping at the eaves of Fangorn, and they see Saruman, who came there to receive the ring from his Uruk-hai troops, but he vanishes quickly after they see him.
Into Fangorn Forest.
Oh, you might have noticed that in the scene just before, Aragorn was wearing his sword on the right side. That's here, as he has now, because the images were mirrored in some instances so that they would always run in the right direction and make everything coherent. But yeah, obviously, if you look at the sword, you notice that it's not how you would normally dress. In the book, they see the Treebeard as a tree stump standing on a hill, and they are walking up there to see where they are in the forest. Here it's a more action-oriented thing, and I don't think Grishnach is alive when they go into the forest. They just run there because everybody's attacked by the rohirrim. Treebeard is voiced by the actor of Gimli, John Rhys Davies, and he had his voice go through an apparatus made out of wood with a lot of reverb and a lot of surfaces where the sound would rebounce. And they made the sound go through there 4 times so that he would have this wooden character, this booming voice. Also, the booming voice might be inspired by C.S. Lewis, who was a friend of J.R.R. Tolkien and who was said to have a booming voice that you could hear far outside his lecture room.
Nobody cares for the woods anymore.
Treebeard is also speaking sometimes while inhaling as well as while exhaling. That's why some of his sentences sound so weird.
Never heard of a hobbit before.
And the thing that he doesn't know hobbits is more big of a deal in the book, because the Ents are actually deciding to count the hobbits into the list of peoples that they have, because the Ents, having lived thousands of years, are kind of the keeper of knowledge in some sense, even though they were already on the edge of being forgotten. You can see how translucent the elven cloaks are. So they are made from a very thin fabric that is the same as the robe, I think. Heathline. The dead marshes are actually a swamp that used to be much smaller towards the beginning of the Third Age, 3,000 years earlier. And it has spread to also cover the areas that used to be the Dagorlad, the battle plain. And that was where the first battle between the forces of Sauron and the Last Alliance clashed against each other in front of the Black Gate. And that's where a lot of the dead elves and men were buried. And that is why when the swamp spread, the graves were taken up, and yeah, that's the reason why you can see the dead faces in the water later, when they reach that area where the Dagorlad used to be. Ah, disgusting stuff. I mean, Gollum is known to have eaten orcs before. In the cave where he lived and where Bilbo found him, there were only orcs nearby. It was an orc. It was near an orc tunnel. And so he has eaten orc flesh for most of his life, and fish, of course. And that's why he says that fish is so nice, because it tastes so much better than orcs.
He does not care if we should die.
Oh wow, I never noticed how Sam is stuffing food in his mouth, like, aggressively. Here you see the Elm's fire that is supposed to be a natural phenomenon in some swamps, where natural gas that would rise would ignite. In the book, it is actually said that there would be little lights that seem to be guiding the way, maybe lanterns, maybe candles. That scene is obviously not in the book. This is just another hit of action to make it less annoying or less boring to watch. I think it's one of these things that are just not necessary to spike up tension and then release it immediately afterwards because he was saved.
What did you call me?
That was your name once, wasn't it? A long time ago.
Smeagol is also containing roots of Old English, so that would be the same language as what the rohirrim are still using. This is one of my favorite scenes from the second movie, because the way the ringwraiths are introduced when you don't really know what their steeds are, and for a long time it looks as if they were still riding on horses. Something I forgot to mention last time is the screams of the ringwraiths. They experimented a lot with what to do. They tried whistling and some piping and different strange noises. But in the end, what they settled for was Fran Welch, the partner of Peter Jackson and one of the writers. She gave one of her best screams, and they used that and thinned out her voice to make it sound like the screams of the undead. Because that's how the Nazgul are described in the lore, that they screamed with the voices of the dead. And the steed of the Nazgul is a fell beast. That is not the actual name of the thing that they're riding on. It's like tiny dragons or giant bats or something. But for the movie, they didn't know how to call them, so everybody just called them a fell beast. The scream of the steed is actually a donkey. When donkeys are angry, they sound very different from the usual "er," and so that is what they used there. And apparently it was very difficult to record, because they had to wait for 1 or 2 days near donkeys, waiting for them to get angry, because they were not allowed to make them angry, obviously.
This forest is old. Very old.
In the book, Legolas says it's so old that he feels himself being young again, as young as he hasn't felt since joining the young companions, Gimli and Aragorn, both of which are close to 100 years old. I think dwarves get usually around 200 years old, so that's why Aragorn is very long-lived for a human, but Gimli is normally aged for a dwarf.
Waking up the trees.
In the book, Legolas and Gimli later form a pact that Gimli would join Legolas exploring Fangorn. They get the blessing of Treebeard to do so, because Legolas wants to discover the secrets of this ancient forest. The voices you hear now are the actors of Saruman and Gandalf speaking at the same time.
Or rather, Saruman as he should have been.
Yeah, because Gandalf impersonates now the person of the rank of the White of the Order, whereas Saruman, in the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, describes himself as having ascended beyond that post, and he calls himself the Colorful, and his clothing is supposed to be a bit more like iridescent. Now when Gandalf lies down and basically dies and is sent back again from his masters from Valinor, he comes back as naked, because his clothing is part of his person and it vanishes together with him when he dies. And then afterwards he's picked up by an eagle and brought to Lothlorien just a few days after the Fellowship left. And then he's given the clothing and the white staff from Galadriel, and then he moves to Fangorn. So Gandalf says that he has forgotten a lot that he once knew, and he has relearned a lot that he once forgot. So that is why now he's struggling with understanding the name, which is, by the way, supposed to be in the northern tongue. I think it comes from Old Norse as well, meaning the Grey Pilgrim. And Gandalf has many names meaning the same thing in the lore. So he has a bit of struggle understanding that name, which means the Grey, while he is the White. One of the, at least for me, disappointments of the movie was that Shadowfax, which means shadow fur in Old English, is supposed to be grey. It is supposed to have the color of a shadow, and here they used a completely white horse. Now, this type of horse, where I forgot the name for that color, even though my wife tends to teach me a lot of English and German words about horses, they are born black and they get whiter and whiter throughout their lives. So maybe they had to take a horse that was mature enough to be trained, and that's why it is white in the movies. But they could have also used one of these that have grey spots over the body, and that's the shape that they stay look like a grey whitish thing. I will write the correct English names for that fur color in the video during editing.
I told Gandalf I would keep...
Oh, in the book they actually did not meet Gandalf. They tell Treebeard that Gandalf is dead, and Treebeard does not believe them, because he has seen Gandalf passing by shortly before he meets Merry and Pippin. But later Gandalf meets them at Isengard before the Battle of Helm's Deep, so there are a lot of movements that are different in the movie and the book. In the book, Aragorn has quite the character development in The Two Towers, because he is portrayed as really doubting his decisions. He blames himself a bit for the death of Boromir and the breaking of the Fellowship. And it's only through the course of this book that he becomes more confident in his decisions. And is moved a bit towards being the king that he later is.